All right, today we're going to dive into a pretty incredible claim. What if there were three specific vitamins, ones your doctor probably never talks about, that could be the secret to getting your blood sugar under control? Let's get into it.
So that's a pretty bold statement, right? The idea here is that most people are doing all the right things, diet, exercise, medication. But what if there's this hidden layer, this missing piece of the puzzle? That's what we're exploring today.
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question. So which vitamins are they? And more importantly, how in the world do they actually work? We're going to break down all three one by one, looking at what the research says about how they can impact blood sugar.
Okay, but first, we have to understand the core problem. It turns out diabetes can trap you in this really nasty, vicious cycle. The condition itself actually burns through certain key nutrients way faster than normal. And here's the kicker. Being low on those exact same nutrients makes your blood sugar even harder to control. See the cycle?
And look, this isn't just a theory. We've got numbers to back it up. The research shows a really strong link here. People with the lowest levels of vitamin K2, a 51% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Wow! And it's a similar story with vitamin D, a 47% higher risk. These numbers are huge, and they really set the stage for what's coming next.
All right, let's get into our first big revelation. We're talking about vitamin K2, and I love this analogy they use for it. Think of it as your body's calcium director. It's a perfect way to describe its main job.
So what does a calcium director do? Well, its main job is to act like a traffic cop for all the calcium in your body. It basically tells calcium where to go. It makes sure it gets deposited in your bones and teeth, where you want it, and crucially, keeps it out of places where it can cause major trouble, like your arteries and other soft tissues.
But here's something you really need to know. Not all vitamin K2 is created equal. There are two main types you'll see, MK4 and MK7, and the difference is huge. MK4 is kind of like a sprinter. It works for maybe 6 hours and then it's done. But MK7, that's the marathon runner. It stays active in your body for up to 72 hours. That's 3 whole days. You can see why that long-lasting power makes it the one everyone's talking about for supplements.
And here's where things get really tricky. If you're low on K2, the warning signs can look almost identical to the complications of diabetes itself. We're talking hardening arteries, bruising easily, weakening bones. You see the problem? You might think it's just the diabetes getting worse, when really it could be a nutrient deficiency that's fanning the flames.
So, what happens if you fix this deficiency? Well, this is where it gets really powerful. The data shows that getting your K2 levels right can slow down the hardening of your arteries, that dangerous calcification, by a whopping 52%. And why is that such a massive deal? Because hardened arteries are what lead to heart attacks and strokes, which are, the #1 threat for anyone managing diabetes.
Okay, but what about blood sugar itself? Well, here's the direct link. Studies show that supplementing with K2 could lower your A1C, that's your average blood sugar over a few months, by almost half a point. Now, 0.48% might not sound like a lot, but for anyone trying to manage their numbers, that is a huge step in the right direction. So where can you find this stuff? Well, let's look at the top food sources. The absolute champion is a food called natto. It's a fermented soybean thing. It's an acquired taste for sure. But if that's not your jam, don't worry. Goose liver pate, hard cheeses like Gouda, and especially the yolks from pasture-raised eggs are also fantastic sources. Okay, on to revelation number 2. This one is a real powerhouse. It's called benfotiamine. And the way to think about this one is as a cellular shield. It's like giving every cell in your body its own personal bodyguard.
So what exactly is benfotiamine? It's basically a special, supercharged version of vitamin B1, also known as thiamine. Now, regular B1 is water-soluble, but benfotiamine is fat-soluble. Why does that matter? Because our cells have a fatty protective layer. Benfotiamine can slip right through that barrier, getting inside the cell about 5 times better than regular B1. Once it's inside, it can get to work protecting the cell from all that damaging high sugar.
And guess what? We see that same sneaky pattern again. The symptoms of being low in this vitamin are just awful, and they're incredibly common for people with diabetes. That constant exhaustion, the burning or tingling in your feet and hands, those sharp pains, it's the classic picture of neuropathy. It's another one of these hidden deficiencies that can just make everything so much worse.
But the protective power here is just wow.
The research suggests that benfotiamine can slow down the progression of nerve damage, that painful neuropathy, by 50 to 60%. Think about that. It literally helps build a shield around your nerve cells, protecting them from the stress caused by high blood sugar.
And it's not just about damage control, it actually gets to one of the root causes of the problem. The science shows it can cut down on the chronic inflammation that drives insulin resistance by about 35%. When you cool down that inflammation, your body's cells can start listening to insulin again, which is exactly what you want.
Now here's a really important note. You can't get this specific form, benfotiamine, from food. It's a synthetic compound, which just means it was designed in a lab to be absorbed really, really well. That doesn't mean you should ignore food, though. Eating foods that are rich in regular thiamine, think sunflower seeds, beans, pork, is still super important for your overall health.
And that brings us to our third and final key player. This one is probably more familiar to you, vitamin D3. But the role it plays here is so central, the best way to think of it is as the master key that unlocks your body's entire insulin system. So how does this master key actually work? Well, it does two critical things. First, it helps turn on the insulin factory in your pancreas, the beta cells. It basically tells them, hey, get to work. Second, it goes to all the other cells in your body and helps unlock them so they can actually hear the message that insulin is sending. This lets the sugar get out of your blood and into the cells to be used for energy.
And the effect is not small. We're talking about a potential 60% boost in insulin production from the pancreas when your D3 levels are where they should be. That is a massive, direct impact right at the source of the problem.
And just like with K2, this shows up in your A1C number. The data suggests you could see a drop of up to 0.6% in just 3 months with proper D3 supplementation. Now start adding these up. You can see how tackling these 3 deficiencies together could be a real game changer.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why for all 3 of these vitamins. Now for the most important part, the how. Let's put this all together into a simple, practical action plan you can actually use. So here's a quick summary. For vitamin K2, our calcium director, you're looking at the MK7 form, typically around 90 to 180 micrograms a day. But, and this is super important, you have to talk to your doctor if you're on a blood thinner like warfarin because it can interact. Next, benfotiamine, the cellular shield. Doses here are much higher, usually 300 to 600 milligrams. Again, a conversation with your doctor is a must, especially if you're on chemotherapy. And finally, vitamin D3, the master key. A common range is 2,000 to 4,000 IU daily. With this one, it's really important to get your blood levels checked periodically because it's fat-soluble and can build up over time.
So there you have it. We've unpacked the research on these 3 incredibly powerful vitamins. But remember, this is all about starting a smarter conversation. It's about being empowered with new questions. So we'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know all this, what's the first question you're going to ask your healthcare provider?